It happened 2 nights before my wedding. Not even a full 48 hours before I was supposed to stand under the autumn sky in the vineyard my fiancé and I had fallen in love with during a random weekend road trip and say I do. But instead of joy or butterflies, I was sitting in the back of a dimly lit rehearsal dinner, staring at my phone, completely numb. My name's Chase. I'm 32, and I come from a family that's always been complicated. You know those families that look great in photos, always coordinated at holidays, smiling at BBQs, polite to a fault when guests are around. But when the door shuts, the claws come out? That's mine. And for some reason, I always seem to be the punching bag in the group chat. I was the middle child of 3. My older sister, Madison, was the family's golden girl from the jump, head cheerleader, prom queen, straight A student, you name it. She could do no wrong in my parents' eyes. Even when she dropped out of college 2 semesters in to marry some guy named Brett she met at a music festival. My younger brother, Tyler, was the baby, and they treated him like a fragile Faberge egg wrapped in bubble wrap. Me? I was the one who always made things complicated. Quiet, introverted, the kind of kid who'd rather stay in his room tinkering with code or reading than playing catch in the backyard. My parents said I overthought things and took things too personally. Madison once called me emotionally fragile during Thanksgiving after I didn't laugh at a joke she made about my old acne scars. Everyone laughed with her. I didn't need another bite that day. Still, I didn't cut them off. I always held on to this foolish belief that if I just gave more, proved more, they'd start seeing me for who I really was. That maybe one day they'd be proud. So when I started my own company at 27, a mobile app development firm that took off faster than I ever imagined, I kept most of it to myself. I didn't want to be the target of jealousy or mockery. I just quietly made a life for myself. And when I met Lauren, my now fiancé, it was like finally someone saw me, really saw me. She was kind, grounded, sharp as hell, and made me feel like I mattered. She didn't care about flashy success or how many zeros were in my bank account. She cared about how I treated the barista, how I talked about my day, how I lit up when I shared a childhood memory that wasn't painful. I proposed after 2 years. She said yes, smiling through tears. I should have known then that my family would find a way to ruin it. The first red flag came a few months into planning. Lauren and I were footing the bill for everything. We chose to have a modest wedding, under 100 guests, outdoors, catered by a family-run farm-to-table place we loved. I reached out to my parents, Madison, and Tyler individually to talk about logistics, hoping they'd be supportive. My parents were oddly indifferent, giving vague, "We'll see if we can get time off," responses, which was wild considering I told them the date 6 months in advance. Tyler ghosted me completely. And Madison, well, Madison said, "That weekend is actually super inconvenient. Brett has a fishing trip with his buddies, but I'll try to swing by if I can find a cute enough dress on short notice." That's what she said, word for word. Still, I kept my cool. I told Lauren they were probably just being themselves and not to take it personally. But deep down, something had shifted. And then came the family group chat incident. A couple weeks before the wedding, Lauren sent out a cute little reminder message in our family group thread. Just a lighthearted countdown with a picture of the venue and a note that said, "Can't wait to celebrate with all of you." She even added a champagne emoji. No one replied, not even a thumbs up. It sat there, unread by my brother, ignored by my parents, and worst of all, seen but untouched by Madison. That night, Lauren quietly deleted the message from the chat. She didn't say anything. She just curled up next to me on the couch and said, "It's okay. It'll still be a beautiful day." I wanted to believe her, so I doubled down. I made a last-ditch effort to make them feel included, even excited. Maybe I was still chasing the fantasy of a family that celebrated me. I didn't just invite them, I went all out. I booked a full week-long vacation in Europe for them, scheduled to happen a month after the wedding. All expenses paid, flights, hotels, sightseeing, everything. It wasn't a honeymoon for me and Lauren. This was just for them. My gift to show that I wasn't holding a grudge, that I wanted to share this new chapter of my life. I didn't tell them right away. I was saving it as a surprise during the rehearsal dinner. But the rehearsal dinner never really felt like a celebration. My parents didn't come. Flights were too expensive, they said, even though they were only a 2-hour drive away. Tyler didn't even RSVP. And Madison arrived halfway through the dinner in a white dress. Yes, white. Lauren's face said it all, but she didn't make a scene. Madison waltzed in like she was the guest of honor, gave Brett a dramatic kiss on the cheek, and proceeded to dominate the conversation with stories about her latest influencer collab, whatever that meant. She didn't ask a single question about the wedding. Not one. And then, 2 days before the big day, I got the text. I was helping Lauren organize table cards when my phone buzzed. It was from Madison. Short, blunt, no greeting. No one's coming to your wedding. We all decided you're not worth the trip. I stared at it. My thumb hovered over the screen. I felt Lauren's eyes on me, waiting for me to read it aloud. But I couldn't. I just handed her the phone. She read it, blinked, and then asked, all of them. I nodded. That was it. No explanation. No apology. Nothing. Just that sentence. For a minute, I didn't even feel hurt. I felt hollow, like I'd finally reached the end of something I'd been holding on to for way too long. I stood up, walked to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water with trembling hands, and just sat at the table in silence while Lauren came up behind me and rested her chin on my shoulder. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. That one message had shattered whatever illusions I'd still been clinging to. But that's not the end of it. Because what Madison didn't know, what none of them knew, was that just 3 hours before she sent that message, I had finally finished confirming the details on that European vacation I booked for all of them. A luxury resort, a private tour of Tuscany, wine tastings, and spa days. Everything set under my name, my account, my card. I'd been planning it for months, talking to travel agents, coordinating flights, curating an experience that would have been the trip of a lifetime. I was going to give it to them as a post-wedding surprise, my way of saying thanks for being there. So when Madison hit send on that message, I just sat there, smiling in disbelief. Not anger, not even sadness, just this eerie calm. I picked up my phone, opened the travel app, and tapped the cancel reservation button. Then I made one more call to the resort manager in Italy. I explained the situation, asked them to send confirmation emails to all guests, letting them know their bookings had been terminated due to a billing issue. The manager, a polite man named Marco, said, "Of course, sir. It will be done within the hour." And then I waited. Because if I know anything about my family, it's that they never read the fine print. And they definitely didn't realize that every room, every flight, and every reservation was linked to me. By that evening, my phone lit up like a Christmas tree. And that is where things got very interesting. I wasn't expecting them to find out so soon. I figured it would take a couple of days, maybe even until they got to the airport. But no, it happened fast, like comically fast. It started with a text from my dad, which was already weird because he hadn't reached out directly in months. I stared at his name on the screen for a few seconds before opening it. There's something wrong with the resort. They just called to say the rooms were canceled? Did you do that? No greeting. No, how are you? Just straight to suspicion. Classic dad. For a man who barely acknowledged my engagement and never once asked how wedding planning was going, he had no problem sending accusatory texts the second something didn't go his way. I didn't reply. I didn't feel the need to. I just watched the silence on my end stretch out like a rubber band. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed again. Madison this time. What the hell, Chase? Why is the Tuscany thing canceled? Still not a question about the wedding. Still not a single acknowledgement of her brutal message from earlier. No apology. Just outrage that the gift she didn't know she was getting had been revoked. The entitlement practically oozed from the screen. Then came my mom. Can you please explain what's going on? I thought this was confirmed. And finally, Tyler. Bro, are you messing with us? For texts, all variations of the same sentiment. Confusion, irritation, zero accountability. I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I turned my phone off and went back to helping Lauren fold the last of the cloth napkins. I remember how quiet it was in that moment. Just the sound of her humming, the soft shuffle of fabric, and this surreal sense of peace settling over me like fog. It didn't last. The next morning, I woke up to a phone buzzing so hard it had vibrated off the nightstand. I reached over groggily, plugged it back in, and turned it on. 33 unread messages, 6 missed calls from my mom, 3 voicemails from Madison, and a group chat that had suddenly sprung back to life after weeks of radio silence. They were furious. Apparently, Madison had shared the vacation news in the family group chat the night before, after I'd canceled everything. She hadn't realized it was no longer active. She sent some over-the-top message like, Chase just dropped the most insane gift for the fam. All-inclusive Tuscany trip next month. Guess he's not such a weirdo after all. I didn't see it, but Lauren's friend Hannah, who was still in the group chat for some reason, screenshotted the whole thing for me. Madison posted that at 6:12 p.m. At 6:37 p.m., someone posted a screenshot of the cancellation email. Dear Mr. Thompson, we regret to inform you that your upcoming reservation has been canceled due to a change in payment authorization. Cue chaos. My dad accused Madison of jumping the gun. My mom asked if it was a prank. Tyler said something about how I always take things too far. Madison, oh, she went nuclear. She posted screenshots of our private messages. Yes, my sister doxed me in our own family group chat, showing that I had seen her "you're not worth the trip" text and didn't reply. She followed it with, "So you're seriously going to cancel an entire family trip just because I told you the truth? That's pathetic, Chase." And that was the breaking point. Not the part where they didn't come to my wedding. Not the part where they ignored Lauren's sweet messages. Not the part where they humiliated me at dinner or when Madison wore a white dress like she was mocking the whole thing. No, the breaking point was that after everything, after the silence, the snubs, the straight-up emotional neglect, they still thought I owed them something. That I was pathetic for finally saying no. That the problem wasn't their absence, their betrayal, or their cruelty. It was my reaction to it. Lauren sat next to me on the couch as I scrolled, her hand gripping mine like she was afraid I might throw my phone through the window. I didn't. I just kept reading. I kept reading until my stomach physically hurt. And then I started remembering all the little things. The birthday parties where my cake was smaller. The time Madison got a new iPhone for Christmas and I got socks. The way my dad would joke in front of his friends that I was the family introvert. You know, every family's gotta have one. The time Tyler crashed my car and my parents made me apologize for leaving the keys out. The dozens of little reminders over the years that I was somehow less. And I realized something that hit harder than anything else. They didn't just ignore me. They never actually saw me. I had spent 32 years trying to prove I was worthy of being part of a family that never really wanted me to begin with. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even respond to the messages. I just set my phone down, looked at Lauren, and said, "I think I'm done." She nodded like she had been waiting for me to say that for years. I thought maybe that would be the end of it. That they'd get the message, literally and figuratively, and leave it alone. Nope. By that afternoon, I had voicemails from extended family. My mom had apparently called my Aunt Denise, who lived 3 states away and who I hadn't spoken to since high school, to complain that I was spiraling. Denise left a voice message that started with, "Hey honey, it's Aunt D. I heard you're having a little moment," and went on to say how family is forever and how I shouldn't let petty things ruin relationships. Petty things. Petty? I nearly laughed out loud. But the laughter died fast when I got a Facebook message from my cousin Riley, who I hadn't seen since his bachelor party in 2019. "Dude, what happened with the trip? My mom said your mom said you're in some kind of fight? Should I cancel my PTO?" I didn't even reply. I had been quiet for so long, so accommodating, so willing to bend and stretch and give without asking for anything in return. But now that I had finally stood up for myself, just once, with one click of a cancel button, they were treating it like I had burned the whole family tree to the ground. And that's when I realized maybe I had. Maybe I finally lit the match they had been daring me to light for decades. But here's the thing. That wasn't even the real betrayal yet. That came the next morning. Lauren and I were at the venue, doing a final walkthrough with the florist and photographer. It was peaceful. The vineyard had this soft breeze, the kind that makes you feel like time is slowing down, and I was finally feeling a little lighter. Until my best man, David, walked up with his phone in his hand and a strange look on his face. "You're not gonna like this," he said, before showing me the screen. It was a Reddit post, a public Reddit post, honor/wedding drama. The username wasn't immediately familiar, just a throwaway, but the writing style, the details, it was unmistakable. Someone had posted a story about a controlling tech bro groom who weaponized money to manipulate his family and canceled an entire European vacation out of spite because his sister couldn't make it to his overpriced wedding. And the kicker? They posted photos of me, of Lauren, of our venue. They blurred out our faces, but barely. The comments were brutal. People calling me selfish, saying I was emotionally immature, speculating that I was some kind of narcissist with money and abandonment issues. Lauren took one look and gasped. "That's your suit. That's our venue." We both knew instantly. It was Madison. No one else would have known that much. No one else would have described me in those words. She had always said things like tech bro to dismiss my career. Always said Lauren was too normal for me. She was the only one who had taken photos at the rehearsal dinner. And now, 2 days before my wedding, she had posted about us online, framed it like she was the victim, painted me as some bitter rich kid having a meltdown because his family wasn't bowing down to his demands. That was the real betrayal, because now it wasn't just private. Now it was public. I stared at the screen for a long time. Not angry, not even shocked, just broken. Lauren put her hand on my back. "What do we do?" I looked at her, my jaw clenched so tight it hurt. And I said the only thing I could think to say, "I think it's time they learn what consequences really look like." I didn't sleep the night before the wedding. Not because I was nervous, not because of excitement, but because somewhere between rereading the Reddit post for the 3rd time and listening to Madison's voicemail for the 5th, something in me snapped. Not in a fiery, screaming, throw things across the room kind of way, but in that cold, silent way where your entire body goes still because you finally realize just how deep the knife really went. There's a kind of heartbreak that's so quiet, so absolute, it doesn't need tears. It just leaves you empty. I lay in bed with Lauren's hand resting on my chest, her breathing slow and soft beside me, while my mind spun through years of memories like a tape I couldn't shut off. Childhood birthday parties where Madison accidentally knocked over my cake. Family game nights where I was always the one blamed for ruining the vibe. Report cards with straight A's that got a nod, while Tyler's C+ in geometry earned him a celebratory dinner. It wasn't just the Reddit post. It wasn't even just the wedding snub or the vacation betrayal. It was the cumulative weight of a lifetime of being quietly dismissed, subtly mocked, and emotionally sidelined. And now, when I had everything to give, when I had built a life full of love, a business that thrived, a future worth celebrating, they still chose to belittle me. They chose to make me the villain of my own story. That was the fall. The realization that no matter how much I gave, it would never be enough for people who decided long ago that I didn't matter. The wedding was the next morning. It was beautiful, stunning, even. The sun bathed the vineyard in gold. Lauren looked like poetry in motion, walking down the aisle in a soft ivory dress that caught the light like silk on water. The guests, friends, colleagues, chosen family, clapped and cheered and wiped tears during our vows. There was laughter, dancing, speeches that made us cry for all the right reasons. Not one blood relative of mine was there. Not a single one. But for the first time, it didn't feel like something was missing. It felt intentional, like the people who mattered were the ones who chose to show up. Not out of obligation, but love. Not because they shared my DNA, but because they shared my heart. Still, even in that joy, the betrayal lingered. I caught myself glancing at my phone during the reception more than once, half expecting another message from my mom, or a new passive-aggressive comment from Madison, or a Reddit thread titled, "Update. Groom has a meltdown during wedding." But nothing came, and the silence said everything. In the days that followed, Lauren and I escaped to a quiet cabin in the mountains. No service, no distractions, just us, a fireplace, and fresh air that felt like it could heal old wounds. We didn't talk about my family much at first. We just existed. We slept in, made pancakes, played board games, and sat on the porch wrapped in a shared blanket as the sun set. And slowly, I started to breathe again. Not the shallow, bracing kind of breath you take when you're waiting for the next emotional gut punch, but the deep kind. The kind that fills your lungs and stretches your ribs and makes you remember what it feels like to exist in your own body. That was the beginning of the rise. Not dramatic, not instant, just quiet steps back into myself. When we got back from the cabin, I muted the family group chat, archived the texts, unfollowed Madison on every platform. I didn't block anyone, not yet. That felt like giving them too much space in my head. But I did what I needed to do to create some distance. And then I started rebuilding. Not in the way people imagine when they think revenge. There was no montage of me hitting the gym or launching a new company or buying a sports car. I didn't suddenly reinvent myself overnight. What I did was simple. I started choosing peace. I met with my team at work and told them I was going to take a step back from day-to-day operations. I promoted my CTO, the brilliant and loyal friend who had been with me since day one, and gave him the reins. I didn't want to live in meetings and stress anymore. I wanted to create again. So I opened a side project, something small, personal, an app to help people set boundaries with family. It was half joke, half serious at first. A digital no-contact planner with reminders for self-care, guided journaling prompts, and even scripts for saying no. Lauren thought it was hilarious and brilliant. We brainstormed late into the night, laughing as we mocked up potential features like Toxicometer. Rate your family's drama level today. I didn't expect it to take off, but it did. Within a few months, we had tens of thousands of downloads. Emails poured in from people who said it helped them walk away from abusive parents, or navigate difficult conversations with narcissistic siblings, or finally make peace with their own decision to cut ties. It gave me purpose. It gave me voice. And it gave me a community I didn't even know I needed. People who got it. Who didn't say, but they're your family, or you should forgive them. People who said, you deserve better. And slowly, I started believing it. Lauren was my rock through all of it. Not just in the way she supported me, but in the way she never tried to fix me. She didn't offer platitudes or try to rationalize their behavior. She just listened, held my hand when I needed it, told me, you're not crazy. You're allowed to be hurt. You're allowed to let them go. And letting go became a process. I stopped checking the family chat, stopped wondering if they'd ever apologize. I stopped rewriting old conversations in my head, trying to figure out what I could have said differently to make them love me the way I deserved. I even stopped checking the Reddit post. But one afternoon, about 6 weeks after the wedding, I broke that rule. It was raining. Lauren was out shopping. I had just finished a call with a nonprofit who wanted to partner with my app. I should have felt proud, fulfilled, but I felt this tug, that old wound whispering. They're still out there, telling their version. So I opened Reddit. The post was still up, still gaining traction, but something had changed. Buried among the top comments were new voices, people who had seen our wedding photos on Instagram, who knew Lauren and me personally, who were pointing out discrepancies in the story. She left out the part where she texted her brother that no one was coming 2 days before the wedding. Didn't she wear white to his rehearsal dinner? I know Chase. He's one of the most generous people I've ever met. The narrative was shifting, not because I fought back, but because the truth has a way of rising, even when you're silent. That gave me the final push I needed. I opened my contacts, scrolled to Mom, deleted the number, did the same for Madison, and Tyler, and Dad. And as I watched their names vanish from my screen, I didn't feel sadness. I felt clean, like taking off a heavy coat you didn't realize you'd been wearing in summer heat. It was over. The part of my life where I begged for scraps of affection from people who never saw me. Now, I had a wife who loved me fiercely, a business that made a difference, a future I got to build on my terms. And most importantly, I had peace. But don't get me wrong, this isn't where the story ends. Because just when I thought I was done with them, they came back, not with an apology, not with remorse, but with demands. And that was their final mistake. It started with a letter, not a text, not a voicemail, a letter, mailed, stamped, delivered to my house in a plain white envelope with no return address. Just my full name, printed neatly, almost politely. At first, I thought it was junk mail, but when I tore it open, a single sentence in familiar handwriting slid out and hit me like a punch to the ribs. You've made your point. Now undo the damage. No greeting, no apology, just that. It was from Madison. I knew her handwriting. Slanted, aggressive, overly loopy on the Y's and G's like she was trying too hard to make it look feminine. I stared at the letter for a long time. I wasn't even angry. I was fascinated, like watching someone dig their own grave in slow motion. Lauren found me sitting at the kitchen table, letter in hand, eyebrows slightly raised. Let me guess, she said, drying her hands on a dish towel. The ghost of Christmas entitlement passed. I smirked. She wants me to undo the damage. Lauren blinked. The damage she caused? Apparently not. I folded the letter carefully and placed it on the table. Then, without saying anything, I walked to my office, opened my laptop, and clicked on a folder I hadn't touched since the week before the wedding. It was labeled contingency. See, here's the thing. I don't believe in revenge for the sake of revenge. Not anymore. I'd done the petty thing already. Canceling the trip, going silent, letting them stew in the consequences of their own cruelty. That was about self-preservation, drawing boundaries, reclaiming dignity. But this was different. Madison didn't just want forgiveness. She wanted a reset. She wanted me to unwrite history. She wanted control back. And that made this more than personal. It made it strategic. So I opened that folder. Inside were screenshots, recordings, emails, and social media backups. All things I had quietly archived over the years. Not out of paranoia, but because some part of me knew this day might come. When you grow up around manipulation, gaslighting, and selective amnesia, you learn to keep receipts. There was an email from Madison calling Lauren a placeholder until someone better comes along. A group chat transcript where my mom suggested that inviting Lauren's family to Thanksgiving would make things awkward. A voice memo Tyler accidentally sent me during a camping trip where he joked with his friend that Chase only gets invited to things so mom doesn't feel guilty. I had enough evidence to build a case against every single one of them, but I didn't want revenge for its own sake. I wanted clarity. I wanted them to understand, viscerally, that I was no longer the quiet kid in the corner who they could walk all over. I was a man with power, with resources, with a platform, and now with a plan. The first thing I did was loop in David, my best friend, and now the only person besides Lauren who had seen the full scope of the family's meltdown. "You sure you want to do this?" he asked, nursing a coffee across from me at our favorite cafe downtown. I nodded. I don't want to hurt them, but I want to make it impossible for them to keep rewriting the story. He raised an eyebrow. "So, like a truth bomb?" "Exactly. Controlled. Precise. No chaos. Just facts." David leaned back, a slow grin spreading across his face. "All right, I'm in." Over the next week, we got to work. Lauren helped me compile a timeline, not just of recent events, but a full history. Every slight, every betrayal, every lie recorded and dated. We didn't embellish. We didn't dramatize. Just cold, hard documentation. Meanwhile, David used his connections in the media. He was a freelance editor for a few major lifestyle sites and helped me pitch a story, not a takedown, a perspective piece. We framed it as what it's like to be the scapegoat child at your own wedding. Anonymous, first person, raw, honest. The kind of story that lives in the gray area between heartbreaking and eye-opening. Not accusatory, but unflinching. The editor loved it. They wanted to publish it on a major platform under a pseudonym, complete with light illustrations and a feature on navigating family estrangement in adulthood. That was step one. Step two, I made a quiet update to the app I'd launched, the Boundary Setting one. We added a feature called Family Ledger. It let users track historical patterns of behavior in family relationships. It wasn't for venting, it was for clarity. You could log events, categorize them, emotional neglect, verbal abuse, gaslighting, and even attach media. It was secure, private, encrypted. We launched it quietly to our most engaged users. Within 48 hours, usage skyrocketed. People were ready to tell the truth to themselves. And I realized then, this wasn't just about my story anymore. This was a pattern, a generational wound, a quiet epidemic of good people being crushed under the weight of family expectations and forced silence. Step 3 was the most delicate. I scheduled a Zoom call with my accountant and my lawyer. Because, you see, a few years back, I'd set up a family trust. Not because anyone asked, but because I had once dreamed of helping my family build a future, of buying a lake house we could all share, of paying for Tyler's kids' tuition, of creating a safety net. That trust was still active, still untouched, still in my name, but not for long. I instructed my lawyer to dissolve it by the end of the month, to distribute the funds into a new charitable foundation, one with Lauren and me as co-chairs, dedicated to helping young adults recover from toxic home environments, find housing, mental health support, and career training. My family would never see a dime. That was step 4. By the end of the week, I felt different. Not vindictive, not smug, just clear. I didn't tell Lauren everything. Not yet. I wanted her to see it unfold without carrying the weight of expectation. But she knew I was planning something. She could see it in the way I moved, calm, deliberate, with a kind of quiet resolve she hadn't seen in me before. "Whatever you're doing," she said one night as we sat on the porch, "just promise me you won't let it darken you." I kissed the back of her hand. "It's not about darkness. It's about turning on the lights." She smiled. "Then light it up, baby." The article dropped 2 days later. It went viral. Not instantly, but steadily, organically. The headline wasn't clickbait. It was haunting. I got married without my family, and it was the first time I felt free. Thousands of shares. Comments from people who said it felt like their story. Therapists quoting it. TikToks dissecting it. It wasn't about me. It was about us. The forgotten middle children. The scapegoats. The quiet ones. The survivors. Madison knew it was me. Of course she did. She emailed me the next day. Not a letter this time. An actual email. Subject line, wow. The body? So now you're some kind of hero? Is this really the image you want of yourself out there? I didn't reply. Instead, I forwarded it to my lawyer. He replied with a one-line response. Per your previous instruction, we will finalize the trust dissolution by Friday. Let them read that headline. And I wasn't done yet, because I had one more play, one final move. A wedding gift that had sat unopened in our guest room since the ceremony. A large, silver-wrapped box with no name tag. I hadn't wanted to deal with it before. Something about it felt off. But now, I opened it. Inside was a bottle of vintage wine. Expensive, rare, and a handwritten card that said, "Congratulations. Thought you might finally be growing up after all. Love, Mom." No mention of the wedding. No apology. Just a backhanded pat on the head. That's when I knew. The time for silence was over. I didn't need to scream. I just needed to show them who I had become. It all unfolded slowly. Not with a bang. Not with screaming matches or door slams or police reports. No viral expose. No public humiliation. Just a quiet unraveling. A series of consequences so well planned, so calmly deployed, that by the time they realized what had happened, they couldn't even figure out where it all started. And that was the point. I didn't want a war. I wanted clarity. And clarity is most powerful when it arrives like a sunrise, subtle, undeniable, and impossible to ignore. The dissolution of the family trust was the first domino. My parents hadn't known I was the one funding it. Years ago, during one of those brief stretches when I tried to build bridges, I'd mentioned I was creating something to help secure our family's future. My dad scoffed. My mom said it sounded like one of my tech world fairy tales. They didn't take it seriously, but they had accepted the benefits, quietly. See, over the past 2 years, they had gotten used to the small payouts. Not big ones, just enough to feel comfortable. Enough to cover car repairs, property taxes, a few credit card payments here and there. Every time, they thought it came from some account Chase set up when he started making money. They never asked questions. They just assumed I'd always be there to bail them out. Then, one Friday morning, it stopped. No warning. No explanation. Just a formal letter from my attorney notifying them that the trust had been dissolved and reallocated. It hit my dad first. He called from a new number, probably thinking I'd blocked the old one. I hadn't, though I had silenced it. His voicemail was short and panicked. "Chase, I don't know what's going on with that fund, but the bank's saying it's gone. Is this a mistake? Call me back." 2 hours later, a voicemail from my mom. "Honey, we're confused. We just got this letter. Can we talk? I'm sure there's been some kind of misunderstanding." But the best came from Madison. An email titled, "You're really doing this?" She wrote 5 paragraphs of what she probably thought was a heartfelt plea. How this wasn't just affecting Mom and Dad, but the entire family. How Tyler was counting on that help with the baby on the way. How actions like this don't just hurt the people you're mad at, they hurt everyone. I didn't respond. Instead, I had my lawyer send a final statement to each of them. One simple page. It read, "This trust was funded voluntarily, with no legal obligation to any party. Its dissolution was a personal decision. Any future communication regarding family matters should be directed to Chase's legal representation. Please respect his personal boundaries moving forward." They went quiet after that. For a while anyway, but the fallout didn't stop there. Because right as the financial rug was being pulled out from under them, something else hit. The article. It was still circulating, still being shared on social media. And now it had a name. Not mine, but someone had guessed it. A friend of Madison's apparently figured out who the story was about and posted a comment under a TikTok breakdown video. Pretty sure this is about Madison T. in California. Her brother's a tech guy. He just got married. People started digging. Screenshots surfaced. Madison's Reddit post. Her Instagram stories from the wedding weekend where she casually mentioned not attending her loser brother's big day. A comment she left on someone's Facebook post complaining about overly sensitive siblings with too much money and not enough backbone. It didn't go full viral, but it was enough. She lost 2 brand partnerships. A fitness company dropped her after a few clients emailed with concerns about her toxicity and bullying. A podcast she'd been guest hosting didn't renew her contract. She posted a long story on her Instagram, black text on a pink background. Just want to say to everyone messaging me, believe what you want. The truth always finds its way through. I'm at peace. Then she deleted her account for 2 weeks. I'd be lying if I said I didn't feel something when I saw that. But it wasn't joy. It was justice. And justice, when it arrives on time, doesn't need fanfare. It just needs to be finished. Tyler, meanwhile, tried to contact me indirectly through David. Apparently, he wanted to clear the air and start over as brothers. That would have meant more if it hadn't come attached to a message where he asked if I could help with a down payment for his new house. David didn't even bother passing it on. Just told me later, over drinks, with a raised eyebrow. You good with me ignoring him? I nodded. Better than good. But the real kicker, the final blow, came 6 months later. Lauren and I were celebrating our honeymoon late. We delayed it for work stuff, but we finally booked the dream trip. 2 weeks in Greece. Just the 2 of us, unplugged. One morning, I checked my email to confirm a boat reservation and saw a message from my old high school alumni network. Boring stuff, mostly. But one part caught my eye. Join us for this year's alumni panel, featuring Chase Thompson, tech entrepreneur and co-founder of the Family Resilience Foundation. That name, Family Resilience Foundation. It was what Lauren and I had renamed the trust when we turned it into a nonprofit. The organization had grown fast. Between the app, the media coverage, and the surge of interest from therapists and support groups, we had found ourselves at the center of a movement. We were funding housing for estranged youth, providing legal aid for people dealing with abusive relatives, even sponsoring therapy grants. And now, I was being honored for it. The irony was poetic. I, the quiet one, the emotionally fragile one, the one they said would never be strong enough to lead anything, was now running an organization that gave thousands of people the strength to walk away from toxic family systems. I showed the email to Lauren. She smiled, leaned over, and whispered in my ear, "You built a new family, one that actually deserves you." A few months later, we bought a house. Not a mansion, not a tech CEO palace, just a warm, spacious home with a backyard for the dog we eventually adopted, and a cozy office where I kept the framed letter from my mom, the wedding gift she'd sent. I kept it not out of sentimentality, but as a reminder that I had grown up in a house where love came with conditions. And now, I lived in one where love was unconditional. We never spoke again. Not my parents. Not Madison. Not Tyler. Not once. No more texts. No more voicemails. No more backhanded letters in the mail. They knew. They understood, finally, that the door wasn't just closed. It had been locked, sealed, and bricked over with peace, purpose, and power. And in the quiet that followed, I thrived. Because here's what they never understood. You don't need revenge to win. You just need to live a life so good, so full, so yours, that their absence becomes the best part of it. And mine did. The last time I ever heard from any of them was a holiday card from a distant cousin who wrote, "Your mom says hi." I didn't reply. I just folded the card in half, tossed it in the bin, and walked out to the backyard, where Lauren was laughing under the fairy lights, glass of wine in her hand, calling our dog back inside. She turned, caught my eye, and smiled. That's when I realized. They didn't lose me because I changed. They lost me because I finally didn't. And that was their real punishment.